When the queen of deception meets the king of crime, passion ignites, but betrayal turns deadly. This is the twisted tale of Jamal King, a feared crime lord, and Chanel Harris, the undercover cop who fell too deep into her role, until love turned to murder. This tale reveals the devastating consequences of forbidden love and the betrayal of trust, showing how secrets and lies can destroy even the strongest connections. Stay tuned as we uncover the shocking twists of this story, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for gripping tales that reveal the deadly cost of secrets and lies. Jamal King, 32, was the epitome of power and control in New Orleans. To the public, he was a suave entrepreneur, the face of King Enterprises, a thriving logistics company that seemed to dominate the local economy. Polished suits, luxury cars, and an expensive penthouse in the heart of the French Quarter painted the image of a man who had it all. But behind the scenes, Jamal ruled an underground empire built on illegal arms deals, drug distribution, and fear. By day, Jamal mingled with city officials, hosted charity galas, and sealed business deals with the wealthiest elites. By night, his name was whispered in dark alleyways and smoky backrooms as the kingpin who controlled New Orleans' criminal underbelly. With an iron fist, he commanded loyalty from his crew, eliminating rivals and anyone foolish enough to cross him. Jamal's charisma was a weapon as sharp as any knife. He could charm his way out of police interrogations and win over potential allies with a disarming smile. Yet beneath that charm lay a ruthless streak. His temper was legendary, and anyone who tested his patience rarely lived to tell the tale. Amid his dangerous world, Jamal was also a man of indulgence. His nights were often spent in exclusive clubs surrounded by his crew, where he reveled in the adoration of those who feared or idolized him. It was during one of these nights that his life intersected with Chanel Harris, though he had no idea then just how much she would change his world. Chanel Harris, 28, was a woman of many layers. To those who knew her casually, she was a talented graphic designer with an eye for detail and a knack for creating bold, captivating designs. Her work had garnered attention from high-profile clients, giving her an air of success and independence. But Chanel's life wasn't as simple as it appeared. Beneath the surface was a past she rarely spoke of, one filled with hardship and resilience that shaped her into the resourceful and determined woman she had become. What no one suspected was that Chanel's career as a designer was merely a cover. In reality, she was an undercover detective with the New Orleans Narcotics Task Force, known for her ability to blend into any situation seamlessly. Her latest assignment was her most dangerous yet. Infiltrate the inner circle of Jamal King, the city's most notorious crime boss, and gather enough evidence to dismantle his empire. Chanel's introduction to Jamal's world came through meticulous planning. As part of her cover, she landed a position as the lead designer for one of his legitimate ventures, a high-end club that served as a front for his darker dealings. It wasn't long before she caught Jamal's attention. From the moment they met, sparks flew. Jamal was captivated by Chanel's sharp intellect, confident demeanor, and striking beauty. Unlike the people who usually surrounded him, Chanel didn't seem intimidated by his power. She challenged him with her quick wit, subtly gaining his respect and trust. For Chanel, it was all part of the plan. But even she couldn't deny the magnetic pull between them. Their relationship escalated quickly. Late-night conversations over expensive champagne turned into stolen moments of intimacy. Jamal showered her with lavish gifts, diamond necklaces, designer dresses, and weekends in private villas. Chanel played her role well, letting herself be drawn deeper into his world, all while feeding information to her team. But the deeper she delved, the more tangled the web became. Jamal wasn't just a target, he was a man with vulnerabilities, dreams, and a charm that was hard to resist. As their romance grew more intense, Chanel found herself questioning her mission. Was she losing herself in the role, or was she genuinely falling for the man she was supposed to bring down? Jamal, unaware of Chanel's true identity, began to let his guard down. He shared parts of his life he had never revealed to anyone, trusting her with his darkest secrets. Chanel, torn between duty and desire, felt the weight of her double life pressing down on her. She knew that every moment she spent with Jamal brought her closer to the truth, but also closer to a dangerous point of no return. Chanel's life was becoming a maze of conflicting emotions, and the lines between her mission and her heart blurred with each passing day. What started as a carefully constructed ruse was now spiraling into something far more personal. Every moment with Jamal King made her doubt her resolve, and the role of an undercover cop became a dangerously thin veil over her true feelings. Jamal, the feared and ruthless Mafia leader, had begun to show Chanel a side of himself that few ever saw. He was protective, thoughtful, and even vulnerable in ways that surprised her. Late at night, when it was just the two of them, Jamal would open up about his past, his struggles as a young man trying to survive in the unforgiving streets of New Orleans and his rise to power. He spoke of his desire to leave a legacy and create something meaningful beyond the criminal underworld. These candid moments created a bond between them that neither could deny. For Chanel, it was a double-edged sword. Every tender gesture and every secret shared brought her closer to him while deepening the guilt gnawing at her soul. She was tasked with dismantling his empire, yet here she was, feeling like she belonged in his arms. Jamal's trust in Chanel grew to unparalleled heights. He invited her into the inner sanctum of his operations, bringing her to exclusive meetings and revealing the intricate workings of his empire. Chanel, ever the professional, absorbed every detail and covertly relayed critical information to her superiors. Her reports were leading to breakthroughs, surveillance of money laundering operations, names of key players, and locations of hidden assets. But the stakes were getting higher. Jamal's instincts, honed by years of survival in a cutthroat world, occasionally flared with suspicion. Though he adored Chanel, he couldn't help but notice her guarded demeanor at times. Yet, her quick wit and charm always managed to disarm him, convincing him that her loyalty was unwavering. As the weeks turned into months, Chanel found herself living two parallel lives. By day, she was the determined officer briefing her team on Jamal's activities. By night, she was the devoted girlfriend, laughing at his jokes and planning futures she knew could never happen. Her internal conflict reached a breaking point when Jamal surprised her with an intimate weekend getaway. In a secluded villa overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, he spoke of his dream to leave the criminal world behind, to build a life with someone who truly understood him. For a fleeting moment, Chanel wanted to believe it was possible, to forget her mission, the lies, and the stakes, and simply be with him. But reality always found a way to intrude. That same weekend, her team pressed her for more actionable intelligence. They were closing in on Jamal, and the window to take him down was narrowing. Chanel's reports were the key to their success, but every word she shared felt like a betrayal, not just of Jamal, but of the fragile connection they had built. The more Chanel fell for Jamal, the more the walls closed in. She was playing a dangerous game, one that would soon reach a boiling point. Love or duty? Truth or betrayal? No matter her choice, the fallout was inevitable, and the consequences would be deadly. Jamal King's empire, once running like a well-oiled machine, began to falter. A string of police raids disrupted key operations, leaving his network vulnerable and exposing cracks in the foundation of his criminal enterprise. Warehouses were seized, shipments intercepted, and trusted associates arrested. Jamal, ever the meticulous strategist, could sense that these weren't random strikes. Someone on the inside was feeding information to the authorities. The weight of betrayal gnawed at him, and his paranoia grew with each passing day. Jamal's once unshakable confidence began to waver, and he doubled down on security measures, vetting his crew and questioning alliances. Trust, which had been the cornerstone of his success, was now in short supply. Amidst the chaos, Rashad King, Jamal's younger cousin and trusted lieutenant, emerged as a key player. Rashad was sharp, tech-savvy, and fiercely loyal, a deadly combination that made him indispensable. While others searched for answers on the streets, Rashad took a different approach, focusing on the digital trail that could reveal the source of the leaks. One night, Rashad stumbled upon a potential lead while reviewing surveillance footage from Jamal's mansion. He noticed Chanel's behavior, subtle but suspicious. She often stepped out during key discussions, clutching her phone or laptop. On several occasions, she seemed to be typing furiously during their private moments. Rashad's instincts kicked in. While Chanel had charmed everyone in Jamal's circle, Rashad always maintained a cautious distance. Her perfect demeanor and strategic arrival in Jamal's life seemed too convenient, and now, with the empire at risk, he decided to act. Waiting for the right moment, Rashad struck when Chanel left her laptop unattended in the study. It was locked with encryption software, but Rashad was prepared. Using a custom decryption tool he had developed for such scenarios, he bypassed her password and accessed the device. What he found sent chills down his spine. Buried within hidden folders were encrypted police files, detailed reports on Jamal's operations, and correspondence with law enforcement. The files contained names, dates, locations, and even evidence she had gathered during their time together. Rashad scrolled through the documents, his anger and disbelief growing with each revelation. Chanel wasn't just any informant, she was a highly skilled undercover cop, and her mission was clear: to bring down Jamal King. Rashad didn't hesitate. He immediately copied the files onto a secure drive and confronted Jamal that same night. "'Cuz, we've got a problem," Rashad said, his voice tight with urgency. He handed Jamal the drive, his face betraying the gravity of the situation. Jamal's world crumbled as he reviewed the evidence. The woman he had opened his heart to, the woman he envisioned a future with, was the very person orchestrating his downfall. The betrayal was too immense to process. The discovery set off a chain of events that would bring Jamal and Chanel's story to a violent crescendo. The walls were closing in, and for Jamal, there was only one way to handle betrayal: swift and unforgiving retribution. Jamal King knew how to set the stage. If there was one thing he'd mastered beyond the empire he built, it was the art of seduction and control. That evening, the penthouse was immaculate, a breathtaking view of the New Orleans skyline framed by floor-to-ceiling windows, soft candlelight flickering against the polished marble, and the aroma of expertly prepared seafood lingering in the air. It was meant to be a night Chanel Harris would never forget, but not for the reasons she imagined. Jamal had spent hours preparing, ensuring every detail was perfect. But behind the warm smiles and attentive gestures, his mind churned. He had seen the evidence, heard the whispers of betrayal, and felt the weight of Rashad's warning. Yet, a small part of him wanted to believe there was another explanation, something that wouldn't shatter his world entirely. He approached the evening with calculated precision, determined not to let Chanel suspect his growing unease. As they sipped wine and shared laughter, Jamal studied her every move, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke, the ease with which she navigated their conversation. How could someone so radiant, so seemingly devoted, be plotting his destruction? When the time came, Jamal leaned back in his chair, his expression soft but probing. "Chanel, I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, swirling the wine in his glass. "About us. About trust." Chanel tilted her head, her smile faltering slightly. "What's on your mind?" Jamal set his glass down and fixed her with an intense gaze. "I need you to be honest with me. No lies, no games. Is there anything you've been keeping from me?" The directness of his question caught Chanel off guard, but she quickly masked her surprise. "What do you mean, Jamal? You know I'm always straight with you." He leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "Don't play me, Chanel. I know about the files. I know who you are." The color drained from Chanel's face. Her initial instinct was to deny it, but the conviction in Jamal's tone told her it was pointless. The walls were closing in, and she had no escape. Tears welled up in her eyes as she tried to explain. Jamal, yes, it's true. I was sent to investigate you. It started as a mission, but things changed. I didn't plan for this to happen. I didn't plan to fall for you. Jamal's jaw tightened, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Fall for me? While you were tearing down everything I built? You expect me to believe that? Chanel's voice cracked as she pleaded. I was going to stop. I was going to drop the case. You mean more to me than any of this. I swear, Jamal, I wasn't going to betray you anymore. Anymore? Jamal's laugh was hollow, his pain palpable. It's too late, Chanel. Do you even realize what you've done? You've destroyed my empire, my trust, my life. Chanel stood, reaching for him, her desperation evident. I didn't mean to hurt you. I wanted to protect you. Protect me? Jamal exploded, rising from his chair. His voice was thunderous now, the calm, calculated man replaced by a whirlwind of anger and heartbreak. You've ruined everything. How am I supposed to believe anything you say when all you've done is lie? The argument escalated, emotions spiraling out of control. Chanel's attempts to calm him only seemed to fuel his rage. In his mind, her words were just another manipulation, another layer of betrayal he couldn't endure. Then, in a moment of blinding fury, Jamal reached for the gun he always kept tucked away in a drawer nearby. Chanel froze, her hands raised as she tried to reason with him. Jamal, please, listen to me. I love you. I was going to make this right. But her words only fueled his anguish. Without a second thought, Jamal fired the first shot, striking her in the chest. Chanel gasped, staggering back, her eyes wide with shock and pain. Jamal didn't stop. Another shot, then another, each one echoing through the penthouse like a thunderclap, each one a physical manifestation of his heartbreak and betrayal. When the final shot rang out, Chanel collapsed to the floor, her lifeless body a stark contrast to the vibrant, determined woman she had been. Jamal stood over her, the gun trembling in his hands, his ears ringing with the sound of his own fury. As the haze of anger lifted, the reality of what he'd done hit him like a freight train. Chanel was gone, and with her, the love and trust he once believed in. The penthouse, once filled with warmth and light, now felt cold and suffocating, a tomb for the shattered remnants of their relationship. Chanel had been missing for hours when her team began to notice the silence. They were accustomed to receiving her late-night reports, but tonight, there was nothing. At first, they assumed it was just an oversight. But as the hours stretched into the early morning, a sense of unease began to settle over her team. They reached out to her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. When they tried her usual contact methods, they were met with the same cold silence. The suspicions began to grow. Chanel had always been diligent with her work, and her sudden disappearance seemed too out of character. They decided to trace her phone, hoping to find a clue. The tracking led them to an unexpected location, Jamal King's penthouse. The realization hit like a ton of bricks. Chanel had not informed them about this particular evening. She had always been thorough, but for some reason, she had kept this date with Jamal a secret, deeming it something private between the two of them. The silence from Chanel now made sense, she had likely underestimated just how dangerous her position had become. She had let herself get too close to Jamal, and now it seemed like her cover had been blown. Jamal's penthouse was becoming the center of their investigation. They traced the ownership of the property, and all roads pointed back to him. The connection between the woman they once considered an ally and the notorious crime boss they had been targeting for months was now painfully clear. Jamal, on the other hand, was scrambling. The weight of what had transpired began to set in as the reality of Chanel's death hit him. But his empire was crumbling, and he knew it. The evidence of Chanel's betrayal was gone, but so was his future. In a cold, calculated move, he called his lawyer, a trusted ally who had handled the darkest aspects of his empire for years. He knew the walls were closing in. It was only a matter of time before the authorities came knocking on his door, but he couldn't let the empire fall without a fight. Meanwhile, Chanel's death sparked a media frenzy. Her story was everywhere, painted as the tragic tale of a dedicated officer who had fallen victim to the very criminal she had worked so hard to bring down. People hailed her as a hero, a martyr for justice. Jamal, on the other hand, was depicted as a monster, a ruthless murderer who had heartlessly killed the woman he once claimed to love. The media painted a grotesque portrait of Jamal, and the public demand for justice grew louder with each passing day. For Jamal, however, the media circus was only a distraction from the real issue, his empire. The pressure was mounting, and as the last pieces of Chanel's investigation began to come together, the net started to tighten around him. The information she had gathered, the evidence she had carefully compiled, was the final nail in his coffin. Without it, his empire may have survived for a time. But now, there was no escaping the truth. The authorities, using the information recovered from Chanel's laptop after her death, had their breakthrough. They found encrypted files detailing everything, from illegal arms shipments to drug operations to the exact locations of Jamal's hidden assets. Chanel had this information for a while but was stuck between doing her job and betraying Jamal or sending in the evidence and loosing Jamal who she had fallen for. Not until after her murder, where the information was retrieved from her laptop. The weight of the evidence was staggering, and they finally had the proof they needed to take him down. The investigation into Jamal King's empire was a methodical and relentless pursuit. For months, law enforcement had carefully pieced together evidence from various sources, surveillance, wiretaps, confidential informants, and, most crucially, the files recovered from Chanel's laptop. As they closed in on their target, the author. Jamal was not a man who could be taken down by chance or mistakes, every step had to be calculated. The breakthrough came when authorities traced Jamal to one of his warehouses, a seemingly nondescript building on the outskirts of New Orleans. It had once served as a major hub for his illegal dealings, storing weapons, drugs, and cash that cycled through his criminal network. Despite Jamal's efforts to conceal his operations, the investigators had been following the money trail, matching it with accounts, transactions, and movements that all pointed back to the warehouse. On a crisp morning, a team of federal agents, local police, and specialized units moved in on the warehouse. Armed with search warrants and the weight of irrefutable evidence, they stormed the compound. Jamal had been hiding out there, trying to regroup after the fallout from Chanel's death, aware that the authorities were closing in on him. He knew it was only a matter of time, but he wasn't going to surrender easily. As officers breached the building, Jamal attempted to flee, but he was cornered in the back of the warehouse. It was there, in the dim light of the abandoned space, that Jamal King's reign came to an end. With his hands raised in surrender, the man who had once controlled an empire of crime was cuffed and taken into custody. The agents moved with practiced precision, securing the scene and gathering the final pieces of evidence needed to ensure that no escape would be possible for Jamal. His empire had been destroyed, and so had the life he had once so carefully built. Jamal was arrested on multiple charges, including murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. The news of his arrest reverberated through the criminal underworld like a thunderclap. Jamal King, the feared and respected kingpin of New Orleans, was no longer untouchable. The authorities had taken down the man who had once been synonymous with power, fear, and wealth. The media storm surrounding his arrest was unlike anything the city had seen before. In the courtroom, the proceedings were swift but unyielding. Jamal's defense team, once a force to be reckoned with, couldn't overcome the overwhelming evidence stacked against him. The prosecution painted a damning picture: the leader of a criminal empire built on drugs, weapons, and bloodshed, a man who had ruthlessly murdered those who dared to cross him, a man who had betrayed the very woman who had fallen in love with him, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. Chanel Harris's name was spoken frequently during the trial, a bittersweet reminder of the woman who had risked everything for justice and lost her life in the process. Her memory, though gone, lived on in the courtroom and in the hearts of those who had worked tirelessly to bring Jamal to justice. The prosecution made it clear that her death was not in vain, and her courage played a pivotal role in the downfall of the kingpin. In the end, the verdict was swift. Life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jamal King was sentenced to spend the rest of his life behind bars, stripped of everything he had once controlled. His assets were seized, his businesses shuttered, and his influence crumbled into nothing. Jamal sat in the courtroom, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow stare. The reality of his sentence was heavy on his shoulders, a crushing weight that no amount of wealth or power could alleviate. The empire he had spent years building, through violence, deceit, and manipulation, was now gone, reduced to rubble. His name would no longer be feared in the streets of New Orleans. Instead, it would be a cautionary tale, a story of a man who had risen too high, only to fall from grace in the most brutal way. His name would fade into infamy, but the scars of his rise and fall would remain in the city. Those who had once been loyal to him were now left to pick up the pieces, their lives shattered in the wake of Jamal's downfall. And Chanel Harris, though gone, had ensured that his reign would come to a devastating and irreversible end. Jamal King's empire was destroyed. His legacy, built on bloodshed and betrayal, was erased from the city he had once ruled. And though he had been brought to justice, the cost had been too high, for him, for Chanel, and for everyone who had been caught in his orbit. This story is a chilling reminder of how love, betrayal, and deception can collide in catastrophic ways. Jamal and Chanel's ill-fated relationship unraveled lives, destroyed dreams, and left only heartbreak in its wake. Do you think Chanel's betrayal justified Jamal's actions, or was he solely responsible for his downfall? If this story shocked you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more gripping stories of crime, passion, and the consequences of our darkest choices.